fantastic. First of all, another big thank you for your leadership and for your endorsement, Senator Stern. Really means a lot. Thank you, Ira, for your support. Proud to count you on our team. And how about my husband? Huh? He's pretty special. And I really enjoyed seeing America come to fall in love with him the way I have. And I'm so thankful for all of you. Thanks to the Abbey for hosting us. What a great place. And a number of elected officials here, including Mayor Pro Tem Lindsay Horvath, who's got some South Bend accent. I'm so thrilled to spend a little bit of time with you, and I want to thank you for being an example of what 21st century grassroots presidential campaign support looks like. If this is the beginning of the future. I'll be honest, when we were making our plans for the spring and figuring out what May was going to look like, we thought that we would be spending our time explaining how to say my name and convincing people that I ought to be somewhere in this process so that we could fight our way onto the debate stage and have a breakout moment maybe in June. Instead, we qualified for the debates a long time ago. People are still trying to figure out how to say my name. But instead of trying to claw our way into the top 10, we are consolidating our position as one of the top candidates in the presidential election. That is evidence of the fact that all of the things that made this campaign unlikely, all of the things that made this campaign unusual, all of the things that made this campaign raise a few eyebrows when we said we were going to get going, are the things that are propelling us into the top of the conversation. The idea of a mayor, not a moment too soon, I think. Yes. At a time when we have got to figure out a way to make Washington look more like our best run cities and towns before it starts to go the other way around. The idea of a voice from a different kind of community, the industrial Midwest, where this president targeted the vulnerabilities of our community, not just with the racism and the xenophobia, but with a message saying that in the face of all these changes that were confusing and disrupting our communities, that we just stop. We just go back. That greatness could be found pickled from the past and opened back up and served today in order to make America great again. And the thing is, that's not how American greatness works.
No.
It's certainly true that we can make contact with a great tradition, but if we look into our past, if we seek the very greatest thing in our past, the kinds of people we really want to emulate, the most important thing we will find about the best people in our past is that they've always kept their eyes on the future. That's the story of my hometown, the city of South Bend, and that's why it's time for a new generation of leadership in American politics. Here at the Abbey and everywhere we go from coast to coast, we see the stirrings of a generational alliance. This is not 1968, when one generation rose up against their parents. This is a moment when you see young people, younger than I am, leading, whether it was the airport protests against the travel ban, or even in South Bend, an amazing women's march, the day of the inauguration. Or the March for Our Lives that had young people saying, "You're not doing enough to keep us safe." We saw young people in the lead, but we also saw their parents and their grandparents at their side cheering them on. That's what change could look like in our country. That alliance is forming around the values of freedom, security, and democracy. Don't let anybody tell you the Democrats don't know how to put what we believe in onto a bumper sticker. It fits. Freedom, security, and democracy. We got to make sure Americans understand that there's more to freedom than cutting somebody's taxes or taking apart a regulation on a bank. That freedom is something we have to build up. We have to lift each other up. We know that because freedom entails being able to live a life of your choosing. And good policy, good government, not big or small, but good government, is government that tears down the barriers to that life. That's why we have an obligation to defend freedom by ensuring everybody has health care so that you can start that small business even if it makes it in your own country. That's why I don't have to be a woman to know that we're not going to be a free country so long as there are attacks on a woman's right to make reproductive health decisions. That's why I know that I've got to stand up for people of color who in housing, education, and so many other areas have been left behind as a consequence of racist policies that cannot be overcome simply by replacing racist policies with non-racist policies, but will require us to establish anti-racist policies to become more justice. And yes, West Hollywood, we know that you're not free if a county clerk gets to tell you who you want to marry, because we know that love is love and freedom is on the line in our ability to That struggle for freedom is the defining energy in the American story. And we shouldn't let anybody tell us that freedom belongs to a political party, and if it did, it wouldn't be the one that's putting up somebody with authoritarian tendencies to run the United States of America. It's the same with security. We are done with the idea that patriotism and security belong to the American political right wing. Not when the defining security of our time, climate security, is something that the folks in charge won't even talk about, but we are prepared to lead on here at home and around the world. 21st century security is a lot more than something you can deal with just by putting up a wall from sea to shining sea. It means election security. It means cyber security. And yes, it means securing this nation's communities in the face of a rising tide of violent white nationalism. And if we want freedom, if we want security, then we had better tend to our democracy. We call ourselves Democrats for a reason. We are committed to democratic values, that our democratic republic, that our democratic capitalism get more democratic and not less as we go. This is imperative. And we can't call ourselves a democracy as long as districts are drawn to where politicians get to pick out their voters instead of the other way around. We can't call ourselves a democracy so long as one side has made it a political strategy to make sure that some voters, usually voters of color, are unable to exercise their right to vote. And I would argue we'd be a much more democratic democracy if we took the rather simplistic step of setting up our presidential elections so that we just give it to the woman or man who got the most votes. Can't be done, some say. The Constitution can't do it. Are you aware that, as we look at the magnificent bar back there, are you aware that we live in a country that changed this Constitution so you couldn't drink? And then thought, that's not such a great idea, we should change it back. Don't tell me we can't change our Constitution in order to make this democracy more secure. The amendment process to begin with. So let's not be afraid to talk about structure.
Yeah.
Economic structure, democratic structure, because it's gotten twisted, it's gotten warped. Presidencies like the one we're living in don't just happen. People like the person in the White House don't come within cheating distance of the Oval Office under ordinary circumstances. And that's why we've got to recognize the seriousness of this moment. That what's happening right now is a symptom, not a cause. It is a symptom of a deep disorientation in our economy and our democracy. But we also have the great benefit of living at one of those rare moments in American history when the decisions we make will ripple out throughout time. That I'm convinced that the things we do in the next months and the next years will decide the next half century of American political, social, and economic life. So let's get it right. Now, in a city famous for storytelling, the other thing I think is so important, I'll be looking to all of our supporters for help with, is to help make sure we are gathering and sharing American stories. Because we are more sympathetic, more empathetic, more decent toward people when we understand them not in terms of a category, but in terms of a story. That's what changed the course of our history when it came to turning the tide on LGBTQ equality. Not that we're there yet, but it's what's helped to turn the tide. It's what's helped to open people's hearts on immigration. It's the story, the understanding of the individual moments in our lives that are shaped by politics. That's why we even have politics. That's what politics is for, is to make our actual individual lives better. And I say this as somebody who has my list of stories about how my life was changed by politics. In some of the best moments and the worst moments of my life. It's why I shared with the country and the world the way it felt on the worst morning of my life. Going out to find my dad in the middle of his chemotherapy treatment, let him know mom's going to need heart surgery, because you don't put that in a text message. And on my way, knowing that I had certain things going for me. One of which was the fact that at my mother's bedside, my husband was right there. As he should be, because in the eyes of the law, as well as in our hearts, he was the legal member of our family. And then in the months that followed, as he got worse and she got better, the fact that we got to make our decisions as a family, difficult though they were, not in terms of whether we were going to be broken financially, but in terms of what was right for this family, because there was a decision, a series of decisions, made in those big white buildings in Washington, that no one would be bankrupted when they reached a certain age by healthcare, because it was time to create something called Medicare. I want every American to enjoy that same kind of thing. Those are my stories. I'm learning more and more of yours. We were in Houston a few days ago, and I met Selena. She's as American as you or I are, but she doesn't have the papers to show it, because she was 2 months old when she got to this country. She missed citizenship by 2 months. She's got siblings who are U.S. citizens, but she's not. And yet she is working, collecting scrap metal with her parents in order to make sure she had enough money to get through college. She is an amazing woman. She's an amazing American. And she deserves our support. Everyone here has a story about how your life went different, went better or went worse, because of the decisions made by people in power. Whether it's the Supreme Court, the U.S. Congress, the White House, or the Water Reclamation District. All of us, in more ways than we can even think about, find that our opportunities are opened or constrained by the decisions made in politics. That's why politics matters. That's why as a species, we invented government and then set up processes to decide how that government's going to work. And that's why being involved in the political process is the greatest act of hope that a citizen can show. You being here is an expression of hope. Watching a candidate speak, sending a candidate money, All of those things are expressions of hope. But I'm also conscious that I'm preaching to the choir. That everyone here gets it. And there's a lot of people out there who don't yet. Not because there's anything wrong with them, a lot of them are just too busy, or overworked, or skeptical about whether this process even matters. And people have been given reason to be skeptical. But we are here to lift each other up in the knowledge that if everybody gets involved, if we all vote, if we mobilize one another, if we broaden the base of our support, if we recruit more people not only to support this campaign but to help shape it, then we will model the kind of country we would be if it weren't for the current administration holding us back. That's how we craft a story that doesn't revolve around the deficiencies of the president, though they be many, but revolves around you and the future that we can create together. I feel really good for that future. Woo! If anybody tells you they're not sure whether America is capable in these twisted and dark times of delivering or vindicating our hopes, tell them you saw at the Abbey in West Hollywood a top-tier presidential candidate on his way to the White House moments after his husband introduced him